Welcome to the Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast, where Gauri Ramkumar of Document 360 finds the best SaaS self-service knowledge bases in the world and then interviews their creators. Let's get started with today's episode.
Good day, everyone. Our guest today is Dave Connis, UX writer at Skuid. Skuid provides a fundamentally new model for creating digital experiences with little or no code required. So welcome, Dave, to Knowledge Base Ninjas podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing pretty good. Trying to survive working from home, but I think I am succeeding, maybe.
Good luck with that. So,
Thanks.
So I'm sure I might have mentioned only a very, very small portion of you in my initial introduction. Please feel free to introduce more about yourself and how you are related to documentation. And if you would like to elaborate a bit about your current profile with Skuid.
So I initially joined Skuid as a technical writer. I'm still in theory a technical writer. We're currently switching my title over to UX writer. So I'm doing both right now. So I'm both. We're a small team of 4. So we have about 100. A workforce of about 100 people, and then there's 4 writers, and we kind of are the hat people for when it comes to content. I've done, in a day I can do some product marketing stuff. I can also end up, spinning up a repo to make docs changes. I do a lot of stuff with our design team. Trying to write good, clear copy, because a lot of times there's just so much overlap with technical writing and in-app content, because you're just looking at you're looking at features, trying to figure out how to describe them and explain them. And you're thinking about how the user is going to see it. So there's just like so much overlap there.
Fantastic. So how did you initially got into documentation, Dave?
So I have been a freelance, just words person, editor, writer, copywriter, technical writer for about 9 years now. I started right out of college. And along the way, I just kind of, when gigs came across the email that were technical documentation based, I did a few. And then when I got a job for a very small startup, that was trying to kind of enable developers to work on projects that are open source projects. I started working with them doing community management, and that morphed into writing knowledge base articles for how to do stuff. And then it also kind of entailed like writing out tickets and trying to, translate developerese. Saying like, hey, you just wrote 10 sentences, which is basically just telling me to click this button. And ended up getting a call from a friend who worked at Skuid, asking about, hey, I know you're learning. I was learning front end development at the time, and he's like, I know you're, deep into the front end trenches. Would you want to come do some technical writing for Skuid? I can, recommend you. And I said, yeah, sure. That sounds awesome. And here we are.
Great. So something I wanted to ask you is, how is UX writer profile different to a normal documentation writer profile?
Yeah, sure. So in a lot of ways, and I'm probably going to get like tons of mentions about how wrong I am. So that's fine. I accept it. But in a lot of ways, they're kind of similar. Like a technical writer, though, I think for the bigger companies, the technical writer isn't going to be looking at product text. They're going to be specifically writing, this is this feature. Here's what it is. Here's what it does. UX writers have kind of been a new-ish thing in the last, I think around 2017 is when it first started kind of taking hold, where their main job is to work on in-app text. So tooltips, labels, properties, onboarding flows, tours. So for somebody like Google, they're going to have people writing their technical docs, and they're going to have people writing, their in-app copy, working with design. But like I was listening to the podcast with Gavin, and he said he was like the principal technical writer, right? Gavin at Salesforce. Mm-hmm. And yep. he said that his team sits in on all of these meetings with developers and designers, and they are all influencing how features are built and writing in-app text. So like there's so much overlap between the two. And I kind of hinted at it before is, our process at Skuid is we also sit in on a lot of the feature development meetings. And because of we're basically investigative journalists, and we have to go in and we have to understand the feature in order to tell users about it clearly. So if a developer says something that we don't understand, we have to ask follow-up questions. And maybe there's a reason we don't understand it. And is it because, the terminology or the taxonomy around it needs to be a little bit clearer? Or is it just because we're dumb and we need to ask more questions? Mm-hmm. And you have this interplay between looking at a technical doc, trying to explain it, and also looking at a feature that's being built. And you're dealing with the words in the technical documentation. So I think there's actually going to be a lot of more pronounced overlap between technical writer and UX writer. Right now, I think there's a lot of emphasis on kind of UX design and people entering the UX writing space from the design arena. But like, I think there's a lot more technical writers doing kind of what I'm doing, playing, both UX writer and documentation, technical writer, that just have been doing it for so long, and mm-hmm. that they just don't have the title UX writer.
Okay, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's nice to know, and I'm sure lots and lots of efforts are also spent on making sure the front end looks very user friendly. So I can relate how important a UX writer job could also be in that aspect.
Right. Yeah, because you want the clearest copy possible. You want to make sure that you can have a really awesome product, but if you call something a really weird name that has nothing to do with the actual functionality, it's going to throw people off. So you definitely want human-centered copy in all places.
Absolutely. So what is your documentation process, and who do you normally get involved in it?
Yeah. So we, like I said before, we're a team of 4. So we are kind of all balancing a lot of things, but we do Docs as code. So we've got our platform, our Docs platform is built on Sphinx. We have it all in a GitHub repo, and then we just have a website apart from our main marketing website for Skuid. That's where all the docs live. A lot of times we are, when we're trying to doc a new feature, we're talking with our developers, SMEs, as we say in the technical doc world. We are talking with design. We're talking with a lot of our solutions engineers, because they're also trying to understand it. We're devouring any existing literature to figure out what it's doing. But a lot of times it just looks like, asking a ton of questions about, hey, what is this thing? And what is it supposed to do? Oh, you said it's doing this. Then why do I feel like it's doing this? Just kind of like, again, investigative journalism. We're just digging into what we're supposed to understand, and because we just need to understand it in order to write about it. So we talk to everybody. Nobody is safe. If you are at a desk on the product floor, you are in our crosshairs probably. So
nice. So, while creating such documentation, what do you think are the important factors one should consider?
Clarity, not sounding like a robot. I have a huge thing about, I always tell my coworkers, if it sounds like I'm standing in a like spaceship and a computer is talking to me and telling me all of these intense words, if like a sentence sounds like it's being told to me by a computer AI, then it needs to be rewritten. That's my rule. Because I really feel that technical writing, like the documentation, even if it's talking about code, should still be user-centric, and we should still shoot to have clear, like the clearest words possible and the most human words possible. Just because just because your audience might understand all the jargony terms, doesn't mean you still need to use those. So like a big thing is like the difference between show and display. Mm-hmm. Like I pick on that a lot because like a lot of times show is just a more normal word and how we would say it in normal conversation. Sometimes display actually needs to be used. So just like being really, really intentional about just because we can use fancy words, should we? And asking those questions, I think, has been a huge part for how I approach documentation, because I don't think people, like developers reading documentation, I don't think they're going to realize that you are using human-centric language. I think they're just going to realize that it's easier to read than others. I don't know if they're going to know why. And it's not necessarily their job to know why documentation is like understandable. They just want to understand the problem, right? Like understand the feature, get what they need to get, and then apply it to what they're doing. So I think even with technical documentation, UX writing, marketing, like there's just, it's always a good rule of thumb to be human centric, use words that are understandable, and you have, use the fancy words if you need to. It's kind of like with Skuid, it's a low code platform. We're not no code, because we see the benefit of extensibility, and we really want people to be able to extend with code. So it's kind of the similar thing. Like I see the benefits of being able to speak the language of all of these really tough to understand concepts, but also combining that with just like, hey, let's use normal words.
Got you. So I'm sure without having to say this, your contribution to the documentation, especially the UX writer's contribution to any documentation, must have a great customer service or success strategy. So have you witnessed directly how much of your work is taken by your customer service or success team?
Yeah, we actually have a really good relationship with our customer support. We actually have check-ins with them every week to see if we're missing anything in our documentation. And a lot of times we are, working with them to double check to make sure things are covered correctly. And they're sending out, our docs to help, clients or customers who need, answers. They're using our docs for themselves because Skuid is a pretty big product, and you can do a lot of really cool things with it. So they're using our docs. And we're also seeing analytics too of just, how much our docs are being consumed. And a lot of that, some of that is just through, customer support, being our evangelists, our customer support team is really smart. So that we get a lot of really good customer feedback from them too.
Nice. So again, something similar related. So have you, or let me ask you this way: do you think you can measure the ROI by introducing quality documentation?
Oh man, yes, with some caveats. I think the cool thing about quality documentation is that you know that people are going to read it because you get really easy. You can have Google Analytics and see your views, right? Like, so the hard part is like you have these different touch points for why somebody would come to documentation. A lot of times it's going to be because they're trying to figure out what something does. And if that's making them successful, I'm sure you'll hear about it in just a possibly a user just continuing to use the product. And this might be a place I admit I just might be a little wobbly on, but I know that good documentation is necessary to give people answers. But you know, what's responsible for keeping a user in love with your product? Is it the documentation? Is it the UX in the product? Is it the helpful tooltips? Is it the awesome customer support? I mean, it's all kind of responsible. And I think the ROI from keeping customers, giving them answers, I know that it's there. Is it easily measurable? Hard to say. I don't know. I would hate to find out what would happen if it wasn't there. Maybe I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is one question where a lot of the documentation writers struggle to answer. So,
yeah.
Whereas some people, they do have a straightforward answer. And to my surprise, they've even kept measuring all these things to report to their superiors and to the management. So
I'm sure you would end up with more support calls. Like that's probably easy. That's probably a way that you would measure it. Like you would have to do a measuring of, you know, how much does a support call cost if the docs aren't there? You know, are you getting more? I bet you like that would be a good way to have an experiment of what it would be if it wasn't there. But I don't really want to find out.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So even though a lot of the products don't change their UI very regularly, but how often do you update your documentation, or how often should your documentation be updated? Do you have any points on that, Dave?
Yeah, I think you should always be. So the hard part is like you're constantly writing new documentation, but you also want to make sure that like that you're, you know, as a writer, you're growing, you're getting better at communicating concepts. Like you're always growing. You're kind of learning tips and tricks here, things, how to structure things better here. And even your style guide's evolving. So like it's really important to constantly be going over what's existing in your documentation, just to make sure that you're providing the user the best experience possible. And that you're even giving the user, like you're presenting it to them the best way possible. Like a constant, like we're always asking, my team is always asking, like, is there a better way to make this clear? Is there a better way to provide more resources? Should we be adding GIFs? Should we be adding screenshots? Like we're always trying to figure out how to make it clear. And I think if you write a thing and then leave it, you're missing out on giving a user a better experience. So.
Great. So are you currently generating any organic search traffic from your knowledge base?
Sort of. I mean, a big part of our docs are, we are getting a lot of Google hits from people going to Google and searching a problem, and our docs are coming up. Where I think that's probably just the pattern. I don't know if that's people outside of our current user base. I think it's a lot of people who are instead of searching the problem on our knowledge base, because we have a search bar, we use our Algolia within our documentation, our doc site. But I think people are just, instead of going to our search and typing the question there, they go to Google instead. So I don't know if it's 100% organic. It might be partially GMO.
Okay.
That's a horrible organic GMO joke. I'll leave now. I'm sorry.
No worries at all. So let's move on to our rapid fire round. So who have you learned the most about documentation from in your career?
Oh, man, I think probably, strangely, John Saito, I think his name is, and Scott Kuby. There's a really good community called Write the Docs that has smart people in it that I constantly am shadowing and stalking. There's a really smart community of UX writers that has a lot of really good things to say about. I mean, it's UX writing focused, but again, I think there's so much overlap between UX writing and technical writing that I think a lot of the lessons learned are pretty transferable to documentation. My coworkers are really smart too, and I learn a lot from them. Shout out to you guys. Good job. Way
Fantastic.
To be smart.
Thank you, Dave. I've not heard anybody saying this, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Super. So can you share a documentation-related resource you have recently consumed?
Knowledge-Based Ninjas. It's a really cool podcast. Just started. Should check it out. And Write the Docs. There's a Write the Docs Slack community that I'm constantly going through.
Yeah, super. So again, what is that one piece of documentation related advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
It's more important to be clear and simple than it is to be fancy and feel like you're using really cool words.
So keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Don't look up words in the thesaurus and then use those just because you feel awesome. Which I used to do. I admit I used to do it. Yeah. I thought the bigger the word, the more impressed somebody would be. It's all lies.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. So do you have anything more to add to our audience before we say goodbye to them?
We can survive the time we're in. We can do it. Be kind. Stay awesome. As Jim from Troll Hunters, the animated series on Netflix, says, stay crispy. I bet nobody has watched that. I'm just so inundated with children's shows right now.
Okay.
You've watched it. Good job. Okay, that's all. I'm done.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dave, for sharing your unique experience and your journey. And
thank you.
Take your time today with us. Take care.
You too.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Knowledge-Based Ninjas podcast. Please head to iTunes, rate, and provide honest feedback on the podcast. See you next week.